Today on No Fear or Favor, we talk about the passage of the African American Family Preservation Act into law. And we also explain how anybody, even you, can solve a problem in your community by going to the Capitol and changing state law. Hello, I'm Jamel Lundy, the Intergovernmental Relations Manager for the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, fancy word for lobbyists. I served in Minnesota House of Representatives for almost 10 years. Hennepin County is the largest county in the state of Minnesota, and the Hennepin County Attorney's Office handles almost half of the state's criminal prosecutions. Follow me as I follow the action at the Capitol with No Fear or Favor. Today on No Fear or Favor, we're going to be discussing how the African American Family Preservation Act, a bill that's been kicked around for about 7 years, finally made into law. We're also going to highlight how individuals can go up to the Capitol themselves to actually change state law.
For another year, Khalees Houston is at the state capitol fighting for a bill to address the disproportionate number of black children in Minnesota's foster care system, legislation she started pushing for back in 2017.
We have a lot of conversations with county attorneys. I don't hear people talking about this issue. The other issues are important, but I don't know one is more important than their children.
The same bill has been introduced multiple times and has always been shot down by both conservative and liberal lawmakers.
That's why it was a struggle for me to come here today, because what do I say to a group of people that have heard years of testimony?
With this bill, this is a first step along the way to ensuring that we can keep more families together and keep Minnesota a safe place and a good place to raise a family. I urge members to vote green.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. Being 120 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.
Before we get into how the African American Family Preservation Act made it into law and the implementation to come, let's get a quick refresher on how bills are passed into law in the first place. Every bill starts as a problem in your community. Usually an individual finds a way that they like the government to approach solving that problem. And in doing so, they approach two authors that are required for a bill to be authored, one in the Minnesota House and one in the Minnesota Senate. Those authors work with counsel to draft a legislative proposal that is then introduced on the respective floors of the Minnesota House and the Minnesota Senate. Once introduced, depending on the chapter of law that it changes, it's referred to a committee of jurisdiction. For instance, if a bill would change, let's just say gun laws, it would be referred to the Public Safety and Criminal Justice Reform Committee in the House and in the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee in the Senate. Once there, the chair has the prerogative to hear the bill or to not hear the bill and forward it on to further committees until it reaches all the committees that have jurisdiction over the particular changes that this law is looking to make. Once the bill has gone through every committee it needs to go through, it is then referred to the floor, at which point each floor needs to act on the bill with the exact same language included in order to make it into law. If the bill is amended in committee or on the floor, then the bill's voted off each body and referred to something called a conference committee. The conference committee works by having each body appoint members, usually 3 to 5, to a conference committee to help sort out the difference. A conference committee requires a majority of each body to adopt what's called a conference report in order for that conference report that has shared language to make it back to the floor of the House and the floor of the Senate. Once it's done so, the House and the Senate cannot amend that proposal. They simply have to vote it up or down. Once it is passed out of the House and the Senate floor, it is then forwarded to the governor's desk, at which point the bill is signed into law. In terms of talking about how a regular person with no experience in the legislature can actively pass a transformational bill, we approach Khalees Houston, a child protection advocate. So Khalees, can you talk a little bit about your journey and how you ended up in the space advocating for this legislation?
I got started in child welfare reform about 10 years ago, and that was after serving in shelter for 5 years. So I served in an emergency shelter in Hennepin County, and it was there that I saw the trauma that children experience once separated from family. That led me to want to have a voice in the courtroom. So I started to volunteer as a guardian ad litem, and there saw how the counties and the courts kind of work together to perpetuate disparities. That led me into community to start organizing organizing and educating our community and stakeholders around the issue essentially led me to the Capitol.
Why is this bill, the African American Family Preservation Act, important to pass?
Child welfare disproportionality is a long-standing issue, not only in the state of Minnesota, but across the country. Over the years, you've seen folks try to assign initiatives to that never really worked to reduce the disparity. So we needed a change in the law to actually address this issue, and that's what this bill does.
In this episode of Fear or Favor, we're also doing a review of the process of how advocates from the community can go to the Capitol to get legislation passed. So let's talk a little bit about the process. What problem were you looking to solve with the African American Family Preservation Act?
The majority of our families that are involved with child protection are involved for so-called neglect. I call it the catch-all statute because it can mean anything, including inadequate food, clothing, or shelter, so i.e. poverty. So we have a lot of impoverished families that are being wrongfully accused of neglecting their children when they just need resources. So one of the important things that this bill does for not only African American children, but all disproportionately represented children, is take into account the parent's socioeconomic status. One of the important things about our current statute, it states that the parent is unwilling to meet the child's needs, not unable. So we want the judges to slow down and really decipher whether this is an issue related to actual neglect. I'm just not gonna feed you because I'm a horrible person and I wanna starve you. Or is, hey, I don't get paid until Friday, so we gotta eat these ramen noodles.
Specifically, what type of law changes were needed to address that problem?
Mandating safety plans, the county, again, slowing down because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to any family problem. So we want them to slow down, engage the family's natural support network, which is going to be family and community, get them to the table and figure out a safety plan to address whatever quote-unquote crisis is going on in the home before we snatch the child, run, and ask questions later. Making sure that the county is engaging the non-custodial parent, which is oftentimes the father. So in practice, what I see is the father being villainized if he's even engaged at all prior to a permanency outcome, that termination of parental right. We're mandating that the counties engage the fathers and give them the opportunity to take the role as custodial parent if mom or, if dad is a custodial parent, if whoever is unable to, successfully maintain that role. One of the other major components of the bill that I'm proud of, requiring that the court place preference on a transfer of custody opposed to a termination of parental rights. So a termination of parental rights is very difficult for a parent to come back to have their rights reinstated. Before this bill was passed, the current law stated that a child had to be in foster care for 4 years before a parent could petition for reinstatement of their parental rights.
In the process of looking to get this bill passed, what authors did you choose and why did you choose them?
Senator Jeff Hayden and Representative Rena Moran were the original authors. Okay. And the reason that I chose them initially is because all of the work that they had been doing prior to the bill being written to help with the issue. So I knew that they had a heart for the work. They have colleagues that might not care about this issue that they have to convince. So if they're not convinced of it themselves, they're not gonna put the fight or the effort into pushing the legislation. So do your homework. If you can, prior to writing it, build a relationship with those legislators to ensure that they really understand not just your heart for the work, but the work in general.
How long did it take to actually pass this bill, and what barriers did you see in the process of actually trying to get it passed?
And Jeff carried it initially, and it continued to stall. And it was passed along to Representative Esther, who did an amazing job and got sweeping votes in the House, that this system is harming the African American community. Although we've been telling this state this, we've been crying out about this for
almost a decade.
Longer than a decade.
Absolutely, yes.
The Council on Minnesotans of African Heritage was created as a result of child welfare disproportionality.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yes,
Yeah.
It was created as a result of this issue. So that's 40 plus years. We have stakeholders such as the County Attorney's Office, who this year was a great help. Thank you, Jamil and Mary. DHS, county stakeholders. So some of my mentors in the work were folks that were fighting, and Lester Collins, who's been a great support, was someone that was working to address this issue 30 years ago.
In terms of the floor vote and the conference committee process, how was that process for you after waiting 7 years? What was your impressions of the debate and the resulting outcome?
Coming in, volunteer, community member, grassroots effort, everything that I'm considering regarding this work, is through the lens of its impact on our community. I have to work with stakeholders and people that are
Like us.
focused on sustaining systems.
Yes.
And it's difficult because
Yes.
our perspectives are so different.
Absolutely.
Our goals at times are very different. A greater responsibility on our system
Yes.
than it is on community. We shouldn't be the ones
Yes.
showing up
Yes.
telling you how to fix this system.
Correct.
That was one of the huge barriers. I'm very appreciative of the county attorney's office being willing to sit down, let us know what the system is saying, what those perceived problems were, and then
Correct.
offering some technical assistance so that we can navigate through that. What our community faced in those rooms was very traumatizing. Very heartfelt stories about what has occurred to our families as a result of child protection's involvement. And it was the bureaucracy that kind of took precedence over the impact to our people. There was a recommendation to take African American out altogether. We understand that you're most impacted, but no, we're not gonna focus on your community. And that's where I had to put my foot down and say, no, we're not gonna do that. So yes, walking away sometimes is necessary because we came back even stronger this year and we got it passed.
My understanding is the governor is supposed to have a bill signing in the coming days. How do you feel about that upcoming bill signing?
I'm very excited for the bill signing. One of the things that I always encourage folks to do with any issue that they're attempting to tackle is to understand policy, law, and practice. So this bill gets at what's happening in policy, what's happening in practice, and then also the legislative changes that needed to occur to really address the issue of child welfare.
A lot of folks think that passing a law is where the process ends, and those of us in actually working in these systems know that's actually where it just begins. What remaining hurdles remain, and how do you plan to approach those?
Implementation is going to be huge. We want to make sure that the right people are at the table, people that understand and acknowledge the harm that this system causes and actually want to change the system. That's going to be very, very important.
What we've heard from Khalees Houston is a detailed summary of how it took 7 years to pass this African American Family Preservation Act. But now that it's law, I'm really interested in how our office is going to approach the implementation.
Well, we are thrilled that it passed, very supportive of the African American Family Preservation Act, and grateful to our community partners for pushing this forward. As we move towards implementation, which is critical, we look forward to working with our client partners to really move with urgency to implement the legislative intent of this law and to move this critical work forward.
And that's it for this episode of No Fear Favor. Hopefully you learned a little bit about the African American Family Preservation Act and also how you can make a difference by solving problems in your community with Minnesota state law. And hopefully I see you there alongside of me trying to make changes for the better with No Fear or Favor.